I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Legal Epi at Lunch session. We'll be talking about some new legal epidemiology resources that we're really excited to share with you that we're launching. MonQcle is now ready for use, and Law Atlas will be very soon. My name is Alex Hess. I am the Legal Training Manager at the Center for Public Health Law Research, and I am joined today by my colleagues Bethany Saxon, our Communications Director, and John Larson, who will be soon our new Legal Tech Manager. John has been with us managing projects, but will be transitioning into this new role and will be more involved in our management and rollout of the technology software that we use for our policy surveillance. So I'll also be sharing our contact info at the end. You can ask us questions throughout today's session using the chat or Q&A function. But if any questions come up after today's webinar, feel free to reach out. Without further ado, I will be talking about MonQcle, which is our legal coding software. So MonQcle, you may have heard of this or be familiar with this. You may already be using MonQcle. Our team has developed this software to support the work of both our team internally and folks all around the world to use MonQcle to build data for use in research and practice. So the platform applies a question and answer framework, and this accommodates full pin citations that link answers to user-provided text. It also includes tools that allow you to easily integrate quality control processes so that you can reduce human error as you are developing your legal data. Like I mentioned, we use MonQcle for all of our policy surveillance projects. If you're familiar with Law Atlas or PDAPs, which we'll be talking a little bit about later, that's where all of our legal data is published to. Folks who work with us publish their legal data to Law Atlas, and all of that is done using MonQcle. So it's a very useful software. But if you're not convinced yet, I'll talk a little bit more about why it's so useful. So for one, it allows us to easily organize law and policy data. Tracking laws requires researchers to examine policies both across space and over time, but this process can very quickly become unwieldy to keep track of in things like Excel spreadsheets or in Word documents. And MonQcle's interface allows us to organize legal research and keep it up to date without having to go back and start over or develop conventions for how we're collecting and collaborating to gather those legal sources. We can sort and mark up legal text, add references, and quickly navigate using tags. So I'll be doing a little demonstration about what MonQcle looks like if you're not already familiar. Tracking laws requires keeping up to date with any new legislation, amendments, case law even that occur in the jurisdictions that you're collecting, that you're examining for your policy surveillance projects. And tracking the law is important to understand how features and variations in the law might be changing over time. So MonQcle allows users to really easily amend the text of the law to reflect those changes over time and also across jurisdictions. So it's a really valuable tool if you're planning to track laws in real time, or perhaps you want to update it once a year. MonQcle makes that a very easy thing to do. And it also allows us to collaborate. Legal research can be expensive, it can also be really time consuming, and keeping track of all the information can be overwhelming, especially when you're working on a team project. MonQcle's flexible features let supervisors apply their own management style and quality control settings to catch the process errors and also to lessen the time it takes to double check your work in the end. And there's also a couple of new features that can be useful for teamwork and collaboration in this new version of MonQcle that I'll be talking a little bit about today as well. And then finally, with MonQcle, you're able to visualize the information and analyze the impact of the law with built-in features that transform research into things like easy to understand spreadsheets, interactive maps. The platform enables you to also publish these customized reports so you can engage your audience and share your research to create a meaningful impact. With just the click of a button, using MonQcle, you can publish directly to lawatlas.org. As I mentioned, that's our flagship database that hosts all of our legal data. PDAPS.org, the Prescription Drug Abuse Policy System, which is specific to drug policy data. It's really easy using MonQcle to publish directly to one of those web pages where you can easily visualize and view the data that you've created. And while MonQcle isn't necessary for policy surveillance, it makes it really efficient throughout many steps of the policy surveillance process. It's a really useful and valuable tool throughout the entire life of your project, really. From developing coding questions all the way through tracking and updating the law, MonQcle can play a pretty significant role in supporting your work. And I'm going to walk you through a few of those features now. For one, developing coding questions is made very simple using MonQcle. If you're not familiar with the policy surveillance process, I should add, please come to one of our intro to policy surveillance webinars. We host those regularly throughout the year. So if any of this isn't sounding familiar to you, I highly recommend you join one of those sessions, or if you'd like to learn more information, feel free to reach out. But developing coding questions is a step early on in the process. Like I mentioned, all of our data is structured using question and answer format. And so MonQcle allows you to really easily integrate those questions and responses into the software. It allows you to directly input your questions, and then you can also edit or add responses as needed. As you may know, if you've done policy surveillance, this is very iterative work. So over time, your questions and responses will likely change throughout the life of the project. And so having this as part of the software makes it really easy to be flexible in adding or changing your coding questions or your responses. So if you've worked in MonQcle already, you may be familiar with this process, but with this, I think you can see that now, these new selection options, you can reorganize questions and add new questions to your question set. Also, with the new version of MonQcle, supervisors can customize user access. So that's another nice feature. If you're managing a project team, you can either add new users as editors, which allows them to also make edits to questions and responses, or you can opt to add users as coders only, which will limit their dataset permissions so that they can't make changes to the question set. So you can still add users as viewers only as well, allowing them to see the coding but not make any changes in the data set. This feature and having this flexibility can be really helpful if you're managing, for example, large teams, or if you're regularly bringing in new users or phasing users out of your data set that you're managing. So that's a nice new feature of project management that allows users to either edit the coding questions or only stick to the actual coding and citation in the individual records themselves. You can now easily view the list of jurisdictions for your project by toggling to the jurisdiction tab. So it used to be all on one page where you would see your coding questions and list of jurisdictions all at once. And now you can toggle between the two for easier view. You'll also see the list of all of the records, which displays the jurisdiction, the effective and through dates, the progress bar, which indicates whether a record's coding has been complete, and the series title. You'll also see on this tab the button to export your data, but I'll talk about more in a moment. Adding new jurisdictions or records to the dataset is also similar to what you've seen before. By clicking the Add New Record button at the top right, you're prompted to select the jurisdiction and input the dates when that record is in effect. So if you've worked in MonQcle already, a lot of this should look familiar to you, but you might notice that the interface is a little more user-friendly, easier to view. And that's similar to viewing the legal text as well. So in legal research, we start with the text of the law. And in MonQcle, this involves the ability to add legal text directly into the software. So like you see here in this example with our earned sick leave data set, the MonQcle workspace allows people to have the law and their coding questions in one place for every jurisdiction. So this looks probably similar to what you've seen already if you've worked in MonQcle and have developed a data set and coding questions. When you're doing legal coding, what you're doing is looking at the text and observing features within that text to answer the questions that you have there on the left. And so MonQcle allows us to create one single coding scheme using the set of questions and answers, and that gets populated into every jurisdiction that you create or every record as you need to code. So instead of viewing the list of all of the laws and citations to the right of your legal text, we've added a new feature that allows you to select View All Citations so that you can review the list of citations you've created in a record. You can also expand or collapse legal source text in MonQcle, allowing you to view just one law at a time or multiple or even all of the laws at once as you're reading through the legal text and doing your coding. So again, makes it for easier viewing of what the information on the page is. So if you want to focus on one statute at a time, you can do that. You can look at all of the law at once, and you can also select View All Citations to specifically view where you've created your citations. Speaking of citations, researchers are also able to precisely identify and link their coding answers to specific parts of legal text. So this is a feature that exists in MonQcle already, but if you're not familiar with it, I'll talk about it a little bit more. As part of both our transparency and technological innovation, we've set up MonQcle so that when a researcher answers a coding question, they're highlighting the specific text where they've found their answer and are tagging it to the coded response. That highlighted text and tag actually facilitates a couple of things. For one, MonQcle will be able to identify the changes from one version of the legal text to another in longitudinal data. So if you're creating a policy surveillance project spanning 10 years, as you're creating new records, MonQcle will identify when there are changes in the legal text over time. So that really allows you as a researcher to see when a potential coded response may need to change. And when we publish that data, that associated text becomes an excerpt with the coded answer that allows people to immediately see the justification for the coded response. Quality control tools are also built into MonQcle, so research managers can see immediate issues and address them to assure the quality of the data. In redundant coding, for example, which is central to what we do, and to make that efficient, we need to be able to instantly compare two independently coded records from the same jurisdiction to assess how the two coders did and what differences in coding they might have had. So we have a redundant coding review tool built directly into MonQcle to see those divergences between two records and work through them to resolve those differences in coding. And finally, when it's time to share the data, the site makes it pretty straightforward. So it automatically creates the codebook and exports the data, supports customization, letting users show or hide certain questions, pick which maps to use or just the table. And then it provides a password protected preview link to allow researchers to review their data in the visualizations before publication to, for example, Law Atlas or PDAPs, like I mentioned, with MonQcle or through an API, which allows you to create your own visualization, perhaps on your own website. So if you want to use MonQcle, but if you'd like to publish or integrate it onto your organization's website, or if you'd like to add new or different features outside of the ones that are included in Law Atlas, you're also able to do so. And once a data set is published, researchers can then go back into the system and update data, and you can republish again with one simple click of the button. So it's very easy to publish and then continue updating and tracking changes, and update publishing as needed as well. And I mentioned the codebook and data page, so I did want to show you those really quickly as well. So to really make use of the data you've created, you want another essential document from this process, which is the codebook. And so the codebook, along with the statistical data is what we'll be using while conducting a legal evaluation, for example. So the codebook can be a really important tool depending on your research needs or the reason you've created this data in the first place. It's a complete list of the questions, the responses, and identifiers relevant for the questions we've developed, including variable labels, their values, and other markers for the data. And again, this is something that's automatically produced in MonQcle, which makes it really convenient. as well as the data itself. So this is an example of what your sort of end product might look like, data that can be used for quantitative empirical evaluation that can be studied to better understand the role law plays in health outcomes. And so, again, this is also something that MonQcle automatically produces. So, another nice feature as well. Um, so, I'm happy to talk more with folks about gaining access to this new version of MonQcle. If you have existing data sets, we can chat more about timelines for getting your data set migrated to the new version. More on that later, but now I'm going to hand it off to Bethany to show you some of those really cool front end visualizations when a MonQcle user then publishes to Law Atlas. So I'll let Bethany go ahead and share her screen.
Thanks, Alex. Hey, so here we are. I'm Bethany Saxon. I'm the Director of Communications at the Center. I am really excited to be talking with you all today and previewing lawatlas.org for you. We've been anticipating this launch for a little while now. I think there's a few of you on this call who have been privy to some of the earlier stages. And we're anticipating a launch at some point later this spring, hopefully by the early summer. So I'm going to dive in and we'll talk through it. I'm going to go into some detail about kind of our process for how we decided to make, or how the decisions that we made for some of the things that we changed. And then I'm going to show you some of the new features that we're really, really excited about. So since its launch in 2011, at this point, the site's been around for quite a while. Law Atlas has been first and foremost a place for disseminating and translating legal data. It provides access to those data through the platform itself, and then through the visualizations, it helps translate the data into usable information for a huge variety of audiences. So one of the primary goals that we've always had for the site, the original sites, other iterations, and now this one, is to make sure that we are using it as a tool to democratize access to the law and to support high quality research through open access data. When we embarked on this redesign, we went through a pretty extensive discovery period to really make sure we were understanding who our users are, how they were using the current site, what we're doing well already, which is always a good thing, know what you don't need to change, and then identifying what we could be doing better to make sure that we were supporting our community's needs more effectively. So through all of that, we identified a short list of opportunities for improvement. Those of you who've used the site may agree or disagree with this list, but this is what we got. We wanted to make sure that our data sets were easy to find. This was something that we internally had struggled with, something that we heard from our users. It was hard to find data sets on our site readily. Users wanted to be able to dive into the data in more complex ways. Our visualizations were great. People like the maps, they like the tables. But they wanted to be able to do more. They wanted to be able to see more than one condition or variable at the same time. And they wanted to be able to see how data sets might overlap. They wanted to be able to understand how data were being used and their role in research. And I think most importantly, in my role of communications, they wanted to be able to share their data and the discoveries that they made within those data a little bit more easily. So we'll start with finding the data. One of the things we heard over and over again was how hard it was. And we worked with our user interface design experts to add features that would support ease of access to our data. Our analytics showed that our homepage is by far the single most visited page on our site, lawatlas.org. It's easy to remember. So we wanted to have that page be as welcoming of a place as possible, showcasing as much information as clearly as possible, with dynamic features that would allow you to find what you're looking for and draw you toward other resources like our training materials. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that homepage now. And what you're seeing here is what it's going to look like. This is a live development version. It's not a live site just yet, but it's going to work to be able to show us what we're doing differently. So to support the findability of our data, we put a search box front and center that has this very cool autofill feature that allows you to start typing in a keyword or part of the title of the data set if you know what you're looking for. And it's going to start offering you big buckets of public health topics. So state and local governments, for example, if I type in preemption, as well as popular data sets that have that term in the data at some point. We've also got a list of featured data sets. So we are able to highlight certain topics that might be of interest and give you the opportunity to find data that way. No matter where you are on our site, you also now have access to this dynamic search in all of the pages. It works just the same way as the home page to help you find what you're looking for. Let's see. Whoops, went too far. Here we go. The Explore Topics page is also new. So if you remember what that looked like previously, you can go visit lawatlas.org and see what it looks like still. This topics page now features a new, more comprehensive library card that we actually modeled after the old school like Dewey Decimal System card catalog. I'm sure some of you will remember using that. Those cards do a great job of clearly organizing a lot of information that's valuable to a variety of users, which is a good problem to have. And it's the same one that we've got. That, you know, we're talking to researchers and members of the media and sort of average everyday people. And we're talking with lawyers and doctors and nurses and other practitioners, right? Anyone and everybody who's coming to the site looking for legal information. In the same way, the Dewey Decimal System card catalog is working with kindergartners and high schoolers and librarians and everyone in between, right? So these cards on our new site do a nice job of clearly articulating the details of the data for users of all types in the same way. We now have a brief lay language summary, which is this right here, of what you'd find in the data set, as well as a selection of the variables that are covered and some additional bibliographic information about the data. So information about sort of the general public health topic, the date range that's covered, which is particularly useful for longitudinal data, the date that it was last updated, so you know how current the data are, and then the geography or the jurisdictions that are covered. All right. Oh, hold on. Things are not connected. Here we go. So once you've found the data, why is this not working? Hold on. Sorry, guys. I'm lost in my slides. Here we are. Once you've found the data, you can start exploring. From our initial discovery work, we knew that the maps and tables were generally good, like I said before, and they're effective ways of showing the distribution of laws and policies, and that a table was often a helpful accompaniment to that information to kind of keep everything organized. So we knew we needed to keep that, but we knew we could do it better. So as we were designing the site, we focused a lot of our attention on adding and clarifying labels, making sure that folks could find what they're looking for very easily and clearly the first time they come to the site, making sure that we're streamlining the design to remove any clutter and things that might not make sense, making sure that our labels were in a language or in a design that was going to be clear to a wide variety of users. And then we also injected some new features that I'm really excited to talk with you guys about next. So to date, Law Atlas has only ever been able to display maps and tables where all of the conditions that you've selected from that question and answer pane are true. What you're seeing in this first demonstration is essentially how Law Atlas works right now, which is that you make selections and all of the selections that you've made are now true in all of those jurisdictions that you've seen. So in this, you're seeing how 3 conditions related to preemption for paid leave are present in 2 states. We've filtered down, this is filter mode, to just a few places where everything we're interested in is happening. But what if we wanted to see where paid sick leave and family medical leave are preempted, not both, but either? So working with our data viz designers, we came up with what we're calling comparison mode, which would do just that. So this went through a variety of iterations and we've landed on what you see here. It displays up to 4 differences simultaneously using 4 colors in the corners of each tile or square. And that allows users to see variation among the blocks more clearly. And it also resolves the issue of the size and shape diversity of jurisdictions, what I lovingly called the Rhode Island problem. But if you think about the shape of Rhode Island versus Texas, for example, that's a little bit of a difference. You can assign more than one variable. Their table is now color coded in the same way as the maps, and you can find the same information in both places. You're seeing the full text of the law here. You're going to be able to see a full list of the questions and answers for each jurisdictions on the map and in the table. You've also been able to access the full legal source here and any notes from our researchers about the answer or the legal source. You can also see in longitudinal data sets how something has changed over time using this policy adoption slide bar. If you were to click on the text of the law once you have moved that timeline, the legal text will also correspond to the moment in time, very much like our current law atlas. The site can now display US state maps plus additional jurisdictions under it, like federal laws, territories, cities. I'll show you an example of that in a little bit. And there's an international map, a map that dynamically places US-based jurisdiction in geographic proximity to each other, like 40 cities or 15 tribal territories. And there's also a table view, which is still accessible, but we now have a table-only view, which is going to allow us to publish data sets for which we may not yet have a map that meets its needs. So for example, if you had something that didn't fit within the set of jurisdictions that I've just explained, we would still be able to publish your data to Law Atlas. We could just use table-only mode until we were able to develop a map that would meet the jurisdictional requirements. So a nice little advance there. One of the features of our data sets is that we typically limit the size and scope to assure quality. So this may be something that a few of you have come up against in the past, but essentially it means that our topics are broken into defined segments if they're a bigger issue, and we break them into different data sets around a particular component of that issue. So rather than having one massive data set, you might have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, or in the case of our US abortion law data sets, we have 18 that catalog 17 different elements of abortion law. It's just such a big issue. So naturally, many of our data sets relate to each other, and we've always wanted a better way to combine or overlap those data sets outside of requiring someone to download the data and then load them into some other program like Tableau or SPSS or something like that, so that they can visualize where there's relationships and how those data correspond. So we wanted to build something that would allow you to do that overlapping within our site directly, and we did. We built the overlapping data set tool, which I'm going to preview for you here, which allows users to drop together 2 or more data sets into the same visualization and then explore the variables together. So on a data set where there are possibilities for overlap, so where the geography is the same and so is the time period, a button will appear below that question and answer pane. Person clicks that, selects any number of the data sets that meet those criteria, those would be listed there, and they add that to the visualization. They can then begin to explore the variables all in one place together. The codebook, protocol, and summary report will be the same as the original data set as what you had visited, but for everything else, all of those other details and variables would be included. All right, so once you've explored, we hope that you'll want to share what you found. And you might be curious about how other people have used the data in their search. So one of the things that we have been doing for a very long time is to keep records of the way that our data have been cited in scholarly work. Now there is a master list on our site that provides you with the citations of the data. And it also is now connected to the data sets themselves. So whenever you come to a data set page and you scroll down, you'll see a page that offers you, or you'll see a component of that page that offers you information about where those data have been cited with links directly to the publication where those data appear. So that is very exciting as well. We've also built an export button, that exports the whole visualization that you've created once you start to query the data set as a PNG file that can be used however you'd like in presentations and documents, social media. There's also a button that allows folks to copy the full URL of the page to the specific query that they've created. So if you have identified something in the data that you think might be useful or valuable to someone, if you're trying to influence someone to change a specific piece of policy or something like that, you now have the ability to send them a direct link to the query that you've developed. Also point out here that this is an example of a map with additional jurisdictions. So you can see the USA tile below the map. That's the federal law collected in this data set. Finally, maybe you're a researcher or a policy analyst, someone who's working on a white paper, who knows. We've added a special little feature for anyone who might be working with the data and then want to give credit. It is a special export citation section on each one of the data set pages that provides ready-made citations of the data to make sure you can attribute it properly. One of the things that we're also working on hopefully over the summer and into the fall is adding DOIs to all of our data. So there will be a permanent identifier as well for that. All right. So that is it for me. I will transition back, but I want to say, we're just really thrilled with this new site. We can't wait for you guys to be able to dive in and to start playing with it and exploring the data. So Alex, I'll let you go for it.
Thank you, Bethany. I will share my screen once more really quickly just to go over a few frequently asked questions. There were a few questions as well in the Q&A, so I'll go over those so everyone knows the details about the logistics. 1 second, let me pull that up. All right, so if you already have an existing MonQcle account, you will in the next month or so be receiving an email from us regarding migration to the new system. What migration means in a nutshell is really just transferring the data you've created in the existing version of MonQcle over to the new version. Now that does take a little bit of time, so I want to caution or flag for folks if, for example, you're working on a data set and you're ready to publish very soon, please flag that for us so that we can make sure we put you on the migration list. Something to note is when you are migrating your data set, you have to hold off on making any changes in the data set for a period of time. We've been telling folks it's about 2 weeks on average. I think it takes a little bit less time than that, but just to be on the safe side, plan for like a 2-week break in any coding changes. So just keep that in mind and let us know if anything does come up if you do need to migrate your data set. But in the meantime, you will hear from us if you'd rather just wait and get that email and respond to that if you already have an account. If you'd like a new account, you can reach out. And if you already have an account but just want to kind of get familiar with the system and see what it looks like, feel free to email us and we can set you up with a MonQcle account. And we are currently funded to support MonQcle access for nonprofit, academic, governmental organizations. So keep that in mind. If you have questions about that, again, we'd be happy to answer those. As far as training on the new version of MonQcle, I know we walked through pretty high level coverage of the details today, but happy to provide some more in-depth support on the full new system. You can contact us. We'll also be providing some asynchronous training resources online very soon. So again, you can wait and see when those are live to review that and get familiar with the new system. But MonQcle is ready to be used. If you would like to start working in MonQcle, we'd be happy to support getting you access to that. And then as for Law Atlas, that is slated to launch later this spring. So once that's launched, and if you have a data set you're working on or plan to, once you publish, it will be published to the new version of Law Atlas, which is very exciting. As for PDAPs, the Prescription Drug Abuse Policy System, like I mentioned earlier, that is still in its original form. So for now, we'll be publishing to Law Atlas, but eventually in the future, PDAPS will also undergo a similar makeover, which is really exciting. So for now, everything will be published to Law Atlas, and we're hoping to have that launched very soon. I think those were all the questions we got in the Q&A as well, but I'm going to also pause on this screen so that you can get our contact information down if you'd like to reach out. And you
One
can
thing I want to mention too, while we have everyone here, is that we've set the date now for our Policy Surveillance Institute, which is going to be August 1st and 2nd in Philadelphia. It's going to be in person. That's a great opportunity to come and learn the policy surveillance process and to get a little bit more training on MonQcle. We do include some MonQcle training for that.
Thanks, Bethany. Yeah, I see a question in the chat. Is MonQcle free? Yes, currently MonQcle access is for those groups I just mentioned. So academic, governmental, nonprofit. For other like for-profit organizations, you can reach out and we can provide you more information with access. Cool, thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. And Law Atlas is open source, so that is freely available currently, and in its new form will be. And these are the resources we've been mentioning throughout today, so please feel free to check them out. The current version of Law Atlas is still live, so it'll look a little bit different than what you've already seen before if you're not familiar with it, but we're excited to have this new version up very soon. Any other questions? I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, so I'll go ahead and start sharing the screen. All right, well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. It looks like we're wrapping a little bit early, so happy to give you about 20 minutes of your time back, but please feel free to reach out with any questions to either myself, Bethany, or John. We'd be happy to point you in the right direction or answer those questions for you. And we're excited to support your policy surveillance endeavors. Have a good afternoon.